I still remember that electrifying moment as if it were etched in molten gold, 100 words of revelation that shattered every illusion I'd built my life upon. I was driving home on a cold, rain-slicked night, the rhythmic patter of raindrops on my windshield a steady backdrop to my thoughts, when an unexpected notification flashed on my phone. In that split second, the comfortable world of our marriage, filled with shared laughter, quiet dinners, and whispered promises, crumbled into a chaotic mosaic of betrayal and secrets. There, hidden among the mundane alerts, was evidence of a clandestine social media account, a digital phantom that revealed a side of my wife I never knew existed. I felt my heart shatter as I realized that everything I believed in was nothing more than an elaborate lie. For years, I had trusted her implicitly. Our life had been a carefully curated blend of normalcy and routine. I believed that our evenings were spent discussing our day, planning our future, and laughing together over simple jokes. My wife, always radiant and confident, seemed to share my dreams. Yet over time, small, almost imperceptible signs began to disturb the calm surface of our relationship. There were moments when she would glance at her phone with a secretive smile, her eyes lighting up in a way that seemed at odds with our shared conversations. I'd brushed it off as nothing more than habit, perhaps a text from a friend, a fleeting thought that needed a quick reply. But as the days passed, those seemingly trivial moments began to coalesce into something more sinister. It started innocently enough, with subtle inconsistencies that I, in my loving trust, failed to see as red flags. I noticed she was spending more time on her phone in private, and there were days when she would vanish into another room with a determined look, leaving me alone with an unsettling silence. At first, I convinced myself that everyone needed a little privacy, that there was nothing inherently wrong with maintaining some boundaries. I clung to the image of our perfect partnership, refusing to entertain the thought that betrayal might be lurking in the digital shadows. Then one night, while my wife was out, she claimed she was attending an urgent work meeting. I found myself restless and unable to sleep. The quiet of the house, usually a comforting lullaby, now rang with an undercurrent of tension. On an impulse, I reached for my phone to check a notification that had been blinking incessantly on the lock screen. It was an app update from a social media platform I didn't remember her using. Curious, I tapped on it. What I saw sent a jolt of ice through my veins, a recently created account, unmistakably linked to her, with posts, messages, and interactions that painted a picture of a secret online life. The posts were casual yet intimate, with photos and status updates that hinted at a side of her I had never seen, a life filled with flirty banter, private gatherings, and cryptic, suggestive messages exchanged with someone whose name I didn't recognize immediately. My pulse quickened as I scrolled through the feed, each post a stark contrast to the life we had portrayed to the world. There were images of exotic locations, glimpses of parties and nightlife, and captions that dripped with double meanings. I felt as if the screen had become a mirror reflecting a truth I had been desperate not to see. The realization hit me hard. The wife I thought I knew was leading a double life, a secret existence carefully hidden from my view. Over the next few hours, I found myself obsessively digging deeper. I discreetly searched for clues on her phone, checking old notifications, past conversations, and even the metadata on some of the photos. Every detail confirmed what my heart had already sensed. This account wasn't a fleeting mistake. It was a deliberate, ongoing effort to create a facade of a life that existed solely online. I began taking screenshots, meticulously documenting every detail, the dates, the comments, even the usernames of people who interacted with her posts. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something far more significant than mere social media indulgence. I had uncovered a labyrinth of secrets that pointed to a betrayal that could no longer be ignored. My mind raced with questions and painful realizations. Had I been living in blissful ignorance, choosing to see only the parts of her life that I wanted to believe in? How long had she maintained this secret account, and who was the person on the other side of those intimate messages? Every memory we'd shared began to take on a new, sinister hue. The gentle smile she flashed when she checked her phone, the moments when she laughed quietly to herself, as if sharing an inside joke that excluded me. The thought that she had been cultivating a hidden identity while I trusted her implicitly was almost too much to bear. In that moment of raw clarity, I felt a storm rising inside me, a turbulent mix of heartbreak, betrayal, and a desperate need for the truth. I knew that I couldn't remain a passive observer in my own life. The digital evidence was a ticking time bomb, its silent revelations demanding to be confronted. With shaking hands, I compiled the screenshots and printed the evidence, arranging them into a rough timeline that spanned the past several months. Every entry was a piece of the puzzle, and together they painted a damning picture of deceit. As the hours turned into the early morning, I sat alone in our darkened living room, my heart pounding in the silence. The weight of the discovery pressed down on me, each second stretching into an eternity. I realized that this secret account was not just a betrayal, it was a rupture in the foundation of our trust, a tear in the very fabric of our shared life. I began to write feverishly in my journal, my pen etching out the raw truth of what I had uncovered: the existence of a hidden social media world that belonged to my wife, the intimate details that revealed a life I had never been part of, and the devastating sense of loss that now consumed me. Every word I wrote was an admission of pain, a record of a truth that was as bitter as it was undeniable. I questioned my own naivety, wondering how I could have been so blind to the subtle signs that now, in retrospect, were glaringly obvious. I vowed that I would not let this betrayal define me. Instead, I resolved to seek the truth, to confront the lies head-on, and to rebuild my life on the unshakable foundation of honesty and self-respect. The road ahead was fraught with uncertainty and the risk of irrevocable loss, but I knew that I had reached a point of no return. That fateful night marked the beginning of a journey into the depths of deception and the painful process of reclaiming my identity. I realized that the person I thought I knew was a mere shadow of the truth, and that the life we had built together was now irreparably altered by the secret she had kept. With the evidence clutched in my hands and the painful truth seared into my heart, I made a silent vow: I would face this betrayal with unflinching courage, demand the answers I so desperately needed, and forge a new future defined not by lies, but by the truth of who I am. As the first light of dawn crept through the window, I closed my journal, my eyes heavy with sorrow yet burning with a fierce resolve. I knew that the coming days would force me into a confrontation that would test every ounce of my strength, that the truth might shatter the remnants of our past forever. But in that quiet, uncertain morning, I also recognized that this was the moment when I would no longer allow deception to steal my future. The digital ghost of a secret account had unveiled a betrayal so profound that it demanded retribution, not through anger alone, but through the decisive act of reclaiming my self-worth. Now, with my heart heavy but my resolve steeled by the undeniable evidence and the painful lessons of betrayal, I am ready to take the next step. I will confront the hidden truths, demand accountability, and begin the arduous journey toward a life where trust is rebuilt on the solid ground of honesty. I am no longer the man who believed in unchallenged love. I am a man awakened to the power of truth, a man ready to forge a future that is entirely his own, free from the shadows of deceit. In the aftermath of that cold, digital revelation, every second felt like an eternity of searing shock and mounting despair. The hidden social media account, this secret digital persona my wife had so carefully nurtured, had become an avalanche that swept away the comforting illusions of our shared life. Over the next few days, my world fractured further with each whispered rumor and every uneasy glance from friends who had witnessed the fallout at our anniversary party. The laughter and light that had once filled our home were replaced by a hollow silence and the constant hum of my own racing thoughts. I felt as if I were trapped in a never-ending nightmare where every memory we had built together was now tainted by betrayal. At first, I tried to drown out the noise. I buried myself in work, hoping that a relentless focus on spreadsheets and deadlines might provide some refuge from the painful reality. But even in the sterile confines of the office, my mind kept drifting back to that fateful evening. I could still see the shock on my guests' faces, the way their whispers filled the room like an accusation. Every time I glanced at my phone, I was reminded of the damning screenshots and posts, evidence that my wife's secret online world was not only real, but growing. It was as though the very device I had trusted to keep us connected had become a window into a life of deceit. The days following the exposé were a relentless storm of emotions. I spent many sleepless nights sitting alone in our darkened living room, replaying every moment in painstaking detail. I could still hear the soft clatter of the door as guests left in disbelief and the heavy, shuffling footsteps of those too shocked to stay. My heart ached with a raw, unfiltered pain that I had never known existed, a pain that wasn't just about the betrayal, but about the cumulative erosion of trust over years of small, subtle omissions that I had once dismissed as harmless. Now, every missed call, every furtive glance at her phone, was a bitter reminder of the lies that had been meticulously woven into the fabric of our marriage. Amid this inner turmoil, I found solace in one constant: my journal. Late at night, under the feeble light of a bedside lamp, I poured out my anguish onto the pages. I wrote about the shock of discovering the secret account, the unbearable sting of knowing that the woman I loved had been leading a double life, and the overwhelming sense of isolation that followed. Each entry was raw, unedited, a mirror to my soul as I tried to comprehend the magnitude of the betrayal. I scribbled down the questions that now haunted me. When did she start? Who was she talking to? How could I have been so blind? And as I wrote, a part of me, deep, flickering, but undeniably present, began to stir with a quiet, unyielding resolve. I vowed that I wouldn't let this betrayal define me. I would confront it, no matter how painful, and reclaim my dignity piece by piece. Determined to find answers, I began an exhaustive search through every digital trace she had carelessly left behind. I combed through old messages, re-examined notifications, and even reviewed posts on the secret account, trying to map out a timeline of her hidden interactions. The more I delved into this digital maze, the more I realized how intricately she had managed to compartmentalize her online self from the life we shared. Every comment, every private message was a thread in a tapestry of deception that spanned months, if not years. The evidence was overwhelming, and with each new discovery, the reality of her duplicity became more vivid and, consequently, more unbearable. The culmination of these revelations forced me to make a decision I had been dreading since that moment on the drive home. I could no longer remain silent in the face of such betrayal. The truth, as painful as it was, needed to be confronted. I gathered every piece of digital evidence, the screenshots, the posts, the timestamps, and organized them into a neatly bound folder. This folder, heavy with the weight of my shattered trust, was not just proof of her deceit, it was a manifesto of the life we had built on lies and the life I was determined to reclaim. That evening, the air in our home was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. I sent her a terse message, requesting that she come home immediately so we could talk, face to face, without distractions. Every minute that passed while I waited felt like an eternity, each second laden with the crushing anticipation of the confrontation to come. I sat in our living room, the folder of evidence laid out before me like a silent judge, my heart pounding in the oppressive silence. The familiar warmth of our home now felt foreign, cold, a place where every object, every photograph, was a relic of a relationship that was rapidly disintegrating. When she finally walked through the door, the change in her demeanor was immediate. Gone was the usual radiance in her eyes, in its place was a haunted, uncertain look, as if she sensed the impending storm of truth. I stood up, trying to steady my shaking hands as I addressed her. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but resolute, carrying the weight of months of suppressed pain and mounting betrayal. I gestured toward the folder on the coffee table, each document a damning testament to a secret life. "I've seen everything," I continued, my voice growing steadier with every word. "Every post, every message, they all tell a story that I never agreed to be a part of." Her eyes darted away, and for a long, agonizing moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was thick, an unbearable pause that stretched out like an eternity. Finally, in a voice that trembled with both regret and fear, she attempted to speak. I can explain," she began, but the words caught in her throat as I pressed on. "Explain what?" I demanded, my tone a mix of sorrow and seething anger. "How could you hide this from me? How could you live a double life behind our home, behind the life we built together?" My questions were not just for the sake of accusations, they were desperate pleas for the truth, for an explanation that could somehow make sense of the devastation. Every word was a sharp incision, slicing through the facade of the love we once shared. Tears welled in her eyes as she stammered out half-formed apologies and vague excuses. The conversation spiraled into a painful admission of betrayal, of secret logins, hushed online interactions, and a hidden world that had existed parallel to our life. As she spoke, the reality of her duplicity became undeniable, a stark, painful truth that left no room for denial. The shock was so overwhelming that I found it hard to process her words. Each revelation was a dagger in my heart, leaving me both numb and enraged. In that moment, I realized that our marriage had been built on a foundation of deception. The trust one had given so freely had been repaid with lies, and the warmth of our shared life had turned cold with the chill of betrayal. I could feel the room closing in, the air thick with the acrid taste of regret. Every memory we had shared, every whispered promise, every tender moment, now felt tainted, as if the very essence of our love had been compromised by secrets. The confrontation was not just an exchange of words, it was the violent shattering of an illusion. With each question I asked, the cracks in our relationship widened until, in the painful silence that followed, it became clear that the person I once knew was irreparably lost. I looked into her eyes, searching for a spark of the woman I had loved, but all I saw was an overwhelming regret that spoke of choices made in the darkness, a darkness that had now engulfed us both. In that harrowing moment of revelation, I felt a profound sense of both sorrow and liberation. The truth, as devastating as it was, had freed me from the shackles of ignorance. I no longer needed to cling to a love that had been built on lies. I could see clearly now, the life we had constructed, the future I had once dreamed of, was nothing but a carefully spun narrative that had crumbled under the weight of deceit. As the confrontation came to an end, I knew that there was no turning back. The public exposure of her secret account had laid our truths bare, and I was left with the painful task of rebuilding my identity from the ruins of what had once been our shared life. I gathered the folder of evidence tightly in my hands, each piece a reminder of the betrayal that had cut so deeply, and I made a silent vow to myself: I would not let this lie define me. I would use it as a catalyst to reclaim my self-worth, to rebuild my future on the solid ground of honesty and truth. In the days that followed, I faced a storm of emotions, waves of grief, bouts of anger, and moments of introspection that left me questioning every aspect of our past. I sought solace in the support of trusted friends and a compassionate therapist, who reminded me that while the wounds of betrayal may never fully fade, they could serve as the foundation for a stronger, more authentic self. Every scar is a story, my therapist said, and every story, no matter how painful, can lead to a new beginning if you choose to learn from it. Slowly, I began to piece together the shattered fragments of my identity. I started by reclaiming my voice in small, deliberate ways, speaking out in meetings at work, reconnecting with old friends who had always known me as more than just a husband, and even writing openly about my journey on a private blog. Each act, no matter how small, was a step away from the deception and a move toward a future defined by my own truth. Now, as I stand on the precipice of a new chapter, I feel both the weight of what has been lost and the promise of what can be rebuilt. The road ahead will be long and fraught with challenges, legal battles, emotional healing, and the difficult process of redefining relationships, but I am determined to walk it with the strength I have forged in the crucible of betrayal. I will confront the remnants of our shattered past, demand accountability, and use every painful lesson as a stepping stone to a brighter future. In that quiet resolve, as dusk settles over my solitary study and the last echoes of our confrontation fade into the night, I know one thing for certain: I am ready to reclaim my life. I will no longer allow the deception that once bound me to dictate my future. I am the architect of my own destiny, and every question I asked, every piece of evidence I uncovered, has lit the way to a new beginning, a beginning built on honesty, self-respect, and the unbreakable strength of my own spirit. That morning, as the chill of early light crept slowly through the blinds, I awoke feeling as if my soul had been stripped bare. The days following my confrontation had been a brutal mixture of despair and determination, a time when every memory of trust was shattered and every heartbeat felt like a silent scream for justice. Yet, amid the relentless ache of betrayal, something in me had begun to stir, a quiet, unyielding resolve to reclaim the man I once was, to rebuild a future that was solely my own. The confrontation had left our home a battlefield of raw emotion. The living room, once filled with soft laughter and the gentle hum of our shared life, now bore the scars of that devastating moment. I still remember the way her eyes had darted away, the quiver in her voice when I laid out the damning evidence of her hidden social media account and secret rendezvous. I watched as our world, once so stable and secure, crumbled into a mosaic of broken promises and silent apologies. That public moment, the shock on our friends' faces, and the heavy silence that followed had all forced me to confront a painful reality. The woman I loved had been leading a double life, and I was left to pick up the shattered remnants of our bond. In the days that followed, I withdrew into a storm of solitude and introspection. I locked myself in our study, where I spent hours rereading every text, every screenshot, and every timestamp from the evidence I'd gathered. The wall of data was as cold and unforgiving as the truth itself. I sat there with a journal on my lap, my pen moving feverishly as I tried to capture the cascade of emotions: rage, sorrow, disbelief, and an emerging sense of empowerment. Every line I wrote was a release, a way to transform my heartache into something tangible, a map of my journey from betrayal to the possibility of healing. Yet, even as the pain cut deep, I slowly began to see that this harrowing experience had also unlocked a part of me I had long kept dormant. In the quiet hours of those restless nights, I started to understand that while the wound might never fully close, it could serve as the foundation for a stronger, more authentic self. I found myself questioning not only her actions but also my own vulnerability. How had I allowed my trust to be so ruthlessly exploited? That introspection was painful, but it also ignited in me a spark of determination to learn, to grow, and to rebuild. The first tangible step in that journey came when I made the decision to file for divorce. I realized that clinging to a marriage built on deception would only continue to erode the remnants of my self-worth. The legal process was grueling and invasive. Every meeting with my lawyer felt like a final severing of the ties that had once defined our lives together. But with each document signed, I felt a small weight lift from my shoulders, a declaration that I was ready to step away from the past and move toward a future built on honesty and respect. I remember sitting in a cold, sterile conference room as my lawyer explained the process, and though my hands shook, I felt an inner strength I hadn't known I possessed. This wasn't just an end, it was the beginning of a rebirth. At the same time, I sought professional help from Dr. Marisol Vega, a therapist whose steady, compassionate guidance helped me navigate the tumultuous aftermath. In our sessions, I learned that healing wasn't about erasing the past, it was about integrating the pain into who I was and using it to fortify my future. Your wounds, as deep as they are not the end of your story, she told me during one particularly raw session. They are the foundation upon which you can rebuild a life that is truly yours. Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deeply within me. Slowly, I began to see that the betrayal, as devastating as it was, could also be the catalyst for immense personal growth. Rebuilding wasn't instantaneous. There were days when the ghost of that betrayal haunted me relentlessly. A song on the radio, a familiar scent, even a fleeting look in a stranger's eyes would transport me back to that moment of discovery. But with time, those painful echoes started to lose their grip. I began to set small, deliberate goals, establishing a personal routine that included early morning walks to clear my head, dedicating evenings to reading and writing, and even reconnecting with friends who had always stood by me. Every step forward, no matter how small, was a reaffirmation that I was more than the sum of my broken promises. At work, I threw myself into new projects with a fervor that surprised even me. I sought opportunities to showcase not just my competence but my creativity, ideas that were born from the raw energy of my heartbreak. I began taking on leadership roles, pushing boundaries, and proving that my professional worth was untethered from the personal betrayals I had endured. Each commendation, each nod of approval from colleagues, was a small victory, a brick laid in the foundation of a new self. It was as if the work became my therapy, a way to channel the turbulence within into something constructive. Outside of the office, I rekindled passions that had long been sidelined. I picked up my guitar again and found solace in strumming melodies that spoke of both sorrow and hope. I returned to writing, pouring my emotions into poetry and blog posts that candidly chronicled my journey from disbelief to acceptance. The act of sharing my story, raw, unfiltered, and deeply personal, proved to be liberating. I was not alone in this struggle. Countless strangers reached out with their own stories of betrayal and healing, and their shared experiences provided a sense of camaraderie that was both comforting and inspiring. One crisp autumn day, feeling a desperate need to escape the confines of painful memories, I embarked on a solitary road trip to a remote mountain retreat. The journey was long and winding, each mile a bittersweet reminder of the life I had once known. Amidst the rugged peaks and quiet valleys, I found a stark, breathtaking beauty that resonated with my inner turmoil. I spent hours hiking along serene trails, sitting by crystal-clear streams, and simply allowing the vast expanse of nature to remind me that life, despite its harsh turns, always held the promise of renewal. In the stillness of those high-altitude moments, I vowed to myself that I would rebuild my life piece by piece, using every scar as a stepping stone toward a future defined by resilience and authenticity. Returning from that retreat, I felt a renewed clarity. I began to draft a personal manifesto, a document that outlined my vision for the future, the values I would live by, and the unyielding commitment to rebuild my identity from the ashes of betrayal. I wrote about the importance of honesty, the power of self-respect, and the necessity of embracing pain as a catalyst for growth. Every word was a pledge to never allow deceit to dim my inner light again. I promised that I would forge a new path, one where I was the sole author of my destiny, unburdened by the lies of the past. The legal process of divorce, while painful, slowly became a symbol of my liberation. I watched as the tangled threads of our shared life were untangled, each signature on a legal document a step toward reclaiming my autonomy. I began to see that the end of my marriage was not a failure, but an opportunity, a chance to redefine my future in a way that honored my true self. With each passing day, I felt a little lighter, a little more in control of the narrative that was finally mine to write. In the final weeks of that tumultuous period, I took solace in the simple rituals that reconnected me with my identity. I resumed early morning runs, the rhythmic pounding of my feet on the pavement a reminder that I was moving forward. I began cooking meals that nourished not just my body but my spirit, each recipe a small celebration of self-care and independence. I even joined a local support group, where the raw honesty of others who had faced similar betrayals helped me realize that while the pain was inevitable, healing was a shared journey, a journey that could ultimately lead to a brighter, more authentic future. Now, as I sit in my modest apartment with the first rays of a new day streaming through the window, I feel a quiet, resolute hope stirring within me. The scars of betrayal, though they may never fully disappear, have become the emblem of my survival, a testament to the battles I have fought and the strength I have forged in the crucible of deception. I have reclaimed my identity, rebuilt my life, and learned that even in the darkest moments, the truth remains a guiding light. I know that the road ahead will be filled with challenges. There will be moments when the ghosts of my past resurface, when the pain of those recordings and the memories of that fateful confrontation will threaten to overwhelm me. Yet, I also know that I have grown in ways I never thought possible, that the raw vulnerability of my heart has given way to an unyielding resilience. I am determined to live a life defined not by the betrayal that shattered my world, but by the courage to rebuild and the unwavering belief that I deserve a future filled with honesty, respect, and love. With every sunrise, I am reminded that the end of one chapter is merely the beginning of another. I step forward into this new dawn with a heart that is both heavy with memory and buoyed by hope. I will continue to write my story, a story of loss and heartbreak, yes, but also one of redemption and rebirth. I am the architect of my own destiny, and I will build a future where every scar is a reminder of my strength, every tear a testament to my journey, and every moment of doubt is transformed into a stepping stone toward a life that is truly mine. Today, I embrace the promise of tomorrow with open arms, ready to face whatever challenges come my way. I have learned that the truth, as painful as it can be, is the only foundation upon which true healing is built. I will honor the lessons of the past by forging a new path, one defined by authenticity, guided by unwavering self-respect, and illuminated by the belief that even the deepest wounds can give rise to an indomitable spirit.